Leila, I am a women's health coach, and I train athletes and active women to be able to optimize their performance, their exercise performance. So I work with a whole range of women, trying to really kind of balance out the way that they train. The things that I'm talking about are from applied experience, of working
Wow.
with. I don't have the PhD in this topic.
So why you actually focus on just working with women?
Why women? A, because I can relate. B, because I've been through so many experiences myself that I thought it would be really good to be able to share those experiences. So I have an interest. And see, there's so much work to be done because male and females are so different, and their requirements are so different, that I don't think it's possible to focus on everybody.
Agree, and I think you're right. When you can actually relate to somebody, it's the same like when you have an eating disorder. Because I used to have an eating disorder, you actually understand it. You really truly get it. What they are going through, so you can help them much better. And also, like what you were saying, there was actually an article just recently. I think it was last month, which was discussing that even when it comes to research on female athletic performance, we
Yes,
don't really know much. We know a lot more about men and or male athletes, but not about female athletes. It is a growing actually field. Just
that's right. It's growing, and I have found that a lot of females train in the same way as men do because that's the advice that's been given to them, or the routines that they've seen on social media, or the coaches that they've previously had have trained them in exactly the same way as they would a male. And but or they go out training and they're training with their boyfriends and their partners, and it hasn't been individualized at all, or it hasn't been separated. So the same guidelines, they're working as hard all month round, or they are all of the things that men are trying and all the research has been done on them, the females are doing as well. And I don't think it's serving them because there's so much more involved in the female body, like due to hormones, and those hormones change throughout the female's life. It's never the same. So along with having female specific training, you then have to have female age specific training because it has to change throughout their life.
yes, that's correct. And you just touched on a lot of different things. But let's go back to menstrual cycle. How does it actually affect athletic performance?
Right. The answer to that question about the way that it affects athletic performance is very individualized. It's going to be different for every single female. And that's probably the reason why it's been very difficult to research it and test it and study it, because every female is going to experience something different. It's not that the periods, having a menstrual cycle itself affects performance. It's the symptoms that come with the menstrual cycle that can impact the athlete and therefore their performance.
I love what you're saying, that it has to
Yeah.
be individualized. I think that we forget everybody is different and everybody has different needs and we react differently. Like, when it comes to exercise, I know women who say that actually when they are having their menstrual cycle, they love training because it helps them with their symptoms. Where other people are no movement at all. So I love what you're saying about, individualizing actually the training program. So can you tell me a little bit more how you do that?
So again, it depends. It depends on whether the athlete that I'm working with is part of a team or is working towards an athletic goal. Because ideally, you don't want to have to stop doing that training. Okay, so for example, if you're training for a weightlifting competition, you want to continue to be able to lift weights throughout your menstrual cycle. But it's the way in which you manage that, and support that changes. So, for example, in the luteal phase, which is the second half of the cycle, many women may experience sleep disturbances, and their mental health may be affected. They may not be feeling as focused, and they need to spend a little bit more time preparing for the weightlifting. So it's how do you support yourself to be able to achieve that goal, if that makes sense.
I guess it would make a difference whether they are actually having an event during that phase.
Yeah, because you can't stop training.
Yes, exactly.
You can't stop training. You can't turn up to your football team and say, I'm not doing it today. However, before you attend that training session, you could possibly spend some time meditating, or you could spend some time doing some focused work, some alignment work, to be able to prepare your mind and your body for presenting yourself in that space. It might just take some preparation. So the way that I work with my clients is I have a training plan with their strength or their endurance, whatever they're trying to work on. But within that, I give them phase specific preparation sequences that can help them to prepare for that training. So they can go in and think, okay, today I need to lift X amount of weight. I really don't feel like doing that today because I'm in a bad mood. I'm feeling fatigued. I'm not in the right place. So what can I do to help myself? I can select this preparation sequence that allows me to get into that space so that I can optimize my performance.
So is it a bit more like mindfulness or mindfulness techniques? I mean, that is how it sounds at the moment.
Yes, I mean, the preparation could be mindful techniques or it could be physical techniques, but the idea in itself of being able to tune in to what your body needs that day is a mindful practice, right? And I think a lot of the time, athletes or the females that I've worked with will just go at it without thinking about where they are that day. They might still be working, so they have a very stressful job during the day, and in the evening they throw themselves at a high intensity activity. But then what that means is that everything has been high intensity that day, and it's very stressful on the body and the mind, and that's not going to have a positive impact on their training. In fact, it's just going to increase the cortisol levels and not enable them to get the best out of their training. So the mindfulness is really checking in with yourself and finding out what it is that you need to prepare.
I love that. And I'm just wondering, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of myself, when I used to go like have a 9-to-5 job and then go to training, I do martial arts, I do kung fu. So I'm like very competitive. I have to be as good as the men. So I just give my all, like my 100%, even when I'm not feeling like it, like kind of, I have to do it, like kind of almost like, I have to show that as a woman, I can be as good as men. So I'm just wondering if that also plays a role, and then we ignore what our body and what our body is actually asking of us.
I think when I start working with the women that I train, they're definitely in a space where they're not checking in with themselves and they are just going in with an expectation. And it's fine to have the expectation, but how are you going to reach that expectation? If you're an athlete, you want to be able to perform your best and achieve your goal, but how are you going to get yourself there? That's the important question.
So apart from being more mindful and having all these practices before actually starting your training, so are there any other aspects that they need to be mindful of while they are actually working out and training?
Yeah, so athletes need to be mindful of their sleep. And especially in the second half of their cycle where sleep disturbances occur, they have to really focus in on that and have good sleep hygiene, and ensure that probably adding half an hour to an hour during that phase, to ensure that you're getting good enough sleep, and also to focus on nutrition, because in the first half, when estrogen is high and progesterone is low, you can do more high intensity focused activities. And so therefore focusing on your carb loading and ensuring that you have carbs to fuel your activity. And in the second half of your cycle, the luteal phase, where the hormones are declining, you will do more low intensity, longer exercises for which fat fueled fat can fuel those exercises. So there's a nutritional focus, and also you need to bump up your protein as well during the second half of your cycle. So there's a nutrition, you really need to be quite hot on your nutrition during your training. Also, the other thing that you really need to consider in the second half of your cycle is recovery. So because inflammation is increasing, you need to look at how you're going to support that. So although you need to continue with your exercise, maybe you need to reduce the frequency. Maybe you need to reduce the intensity, so that, or maybe you put in more recovery days. And that recovery could look like, I always give restorative yoga to my clients, because I really want them to really just come down from all of the stress of everything that they've been experiencing. And also because like sleep can then affect your mood, you need to be able to control that as well. Recovery can also look like ice baths, to control the inflammation, and having a rest day. And a rest day is really difficult for females, because they might be working, and their work might be stressful. They might be mothers, so that's always going to be stressful. So actually carving out a rest day, the way that I do it personally is I've signed up with a gym where they have a spa facility where I can actually go and sit in the steam room or the sauna, and then go into for an ice plunge and then come out again. And that's what I do especially in the latter part of my cycle. And then really looking after your mental health in the second half of your cycle, because then that will really improve your approach to your exercise.
What I'm hearing is basically tuning into your body and seeing what your body needs. And I think that is something we have, the society, the way we are living nowadays, we have to be somewhere, at a workplace at a certain time. So we cannot say, oh, today, I need some more sleep, or, you have a lot of obligations and tasks to fulfill. So we cannot really actually kind of listen to our bodies. I think we have actually, lost this ability. And what I'm hearing is that actually when you tune into your body and see what your body requires, you can still, work hard and be competitive. But sometimes, maybe some days, you just need to do other exercises.
Exactly. It's the same whether you're a menstruating woman or a man, a male athlete. It's the same thing. A coach will never set a program that is high intensive and requires a lot of strength and power throughout the entire month. That's just not the way it works. You set an undulating plan, which means that sometimes it's high and strong, or sometimes it requires more rest, and it goes up and down like this. So it's not just if you're menstruating, it is to be able to optimize, you need to be able to have these different approaches to exercise. Because if you kept doing that, you will burn out, and you're not giving your body the opportunity to recover. And recovery is equally important as strength development.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm actually a stretching coach. When I was working as a PT, I used to tell people, you need to stretch. You cannot actually ignore that part. It's not just a few minutes at the end of your workout. No, it is so important to actually calm down. And also, like kind of, if you're having a bad day for whatever reason, still carry on with your workout, but just do a low intensity. Maybe just a slow run, a slow jog, or even reducing your weight. And I think that is it. Like kind of, you don't want to kind of bring down your weights. You say like kind of, if I have been lifting that, heavy, I need to carry on or even increase it. But going down, that, kind of like, it looks like, going a step back. And then I think that is where the coach comes in, isn't it? Assuring the client, the athlete, that's okay. It is part of the bigger picture, part of your
exactly. So the way that I do it in the program that I deliver, which is called the synced method, in weeks 1 and 2, the females will be lifting heavy, and they'll be developing upon the previous month, unless, of course, something's got in the way, they've been on holiday or they've got ill, their strength may have gone down a little bit. And then week 3, I call it deload. So it's a deloading week where they take the intensity right down and they focus on their body weight, their body alignment, doing some yoga, really focusing on unilateral, their joints and their balance. And then in the final week, it's more like swimming, restorative yoga, light jogging, so that they can recuperate and then they come back again to the high intensity.
I love that. Now, shifting gears, let's talk about a little bit, touch on that, like kind of, what about when a woman goes into menopause? What changes, when it comes to their workout?
So when women reach the menopause, there are a few things. I always focus on interval training. So the thing that doesn't work for women from, perimenopause into menopause is doing the long distance runs, running at a low intensity. You need to be able to take the intensity up and down and have, high intensity rest, so that you're challenging your body because your hormones are declining. You need that to be able to support it. Keeping it shorter, intervals, like even though women might be suffering with sweats and stuff, still getting them to sweat. Like they might be reluctant to break out more into a sweat, but it's just for a short amount of time. And then also to really focus on strength training. Lifting weights is really important for the bones. But what I find is that some women only start to focus on it once they enter perimenopause and they're suffering with those symptoms. But this should be from like throughout the woman's life. They should be lifting weights and then adapting that as they go. But like they're starting it later. It's not too late, but it would have been preferable if they started it before.
Yeah, I have seen that as well. I used to tell my female clients, lifting weights, that is like kind of so important. Instead, a lot of women tend to go on treadmill and just, run and run without realizing, the importance of actually strength training. It's so important for women and for our bones. We really need to do it, as you say, as early as possible. And also, I think there's something really empowering about it. When a woman actually can lift some weight, especially because a lot of women believe that they cannot lift heavy. So when they finally do it, there's something really empowering about it. They love it. And yes, we did it. So yes, definitely. I think that is something they should start, as early as possible. Now, you touched on nutrition a bit, and I want to go back to it because, again, you were saying about carb loading in the first, phase and then, more fat. And I'm wondering if it is a problem, again, more for women because they tend to avoid fat, like kind of, they want to lose fat, so they shouldn't be eating fat. And obviously, when you look at men, in sports, the focus is usually more on protein anyway. Everybody talks about that, but nobody talks about carbs and fats, really. So what is your take on that? Do you struggle to tell your clients to kind of consume a bit more fat? Are they reluctant actually to follow your advice when it comes to fat?
I think they're mainly reluctant to carb load. I think there's a really negative connotation about carbs. A lot of women say it makes them feel bloated, or that they've been advised not to have carbs because of weight gain. I don't think I've had a negative response to the fats. In fact, I think it's just kind of got them to think about what the food is that they're eating in front of them, and does it have fat content? But the main reluctance comes around carbs, to be honest.
You're right. Carbs is always like kind of, no, you're right. So what about other coaches? Other, personal trainers or fitness instructors? What do they say when they hear what you are doing? Do you get any pushback? Do you get like kind of disbelief almost?
I don't work in a gym. I do online coaching. When I go to the gym to train myself, I've noticed that the question isn't being asked, about hormones. I've been lucky enough to kind of overhear a few consultations sometimes, just because I'm looking into whether the conversation is being had. And there's nothing about hormones, there's nothing about menstrual cycles. And in fact, when I look across the gym floor, whether the woman is in their 60s, whether it's a young girl or a woman in their 40s, they're all training with male coaches in exactly the same way. And I don't feel like they're learning anything about what is going to complement where they are that day. I feel like it's such a battle. So the first question I ask when my client walks in is like, how are you today? How are you feeling today? How do your muscles feel? Or like, where are you in your cycle? If I know that they have a menstrual cycle. And that can either be received really well by the client, or it can really surprise the client because they're not expecting to be asked, what's my menstrual cycle got to do with anything? It could impact the way that you approach your session today. So I can help you to get into the right space. The thing that's difficult in gym environments or group classes is that, again, like I said, with team sports and stuff, it's an individual thing. So I think coaches are reluctant to design something around it because it's individualized. How are they going to be able to cater for everybody? So I do think an awareness of it is important. If I know that my client suffers with sleep disturbances, I might get them to warm up slightly differently. I might say, you've had a really bad night's sleep, maybe take the intensity down today. And they might be reluctant to do that because they've come to work out. But I'd rather they take it slow and build it up when they're comfortable, and when I see that their movement hasn't been affected by their lack of sleep.
You're right. I mean, I remember when I was working in the gyms, we had like a questionnaire, and there was no mention of like kind of where you are in your cycle and anything like that. And also believe like we need to take a holistic approach, even when it comes to workout. And for me, it's always like, do you want to prevent injuries? Do you want to come back next week and work out? Or do you want just to like do something today and then maybe not be able to train, for the next 2 weeks? So also like kind of, preventing injuries, that's really important. And I think if you want to prevent injuries, then you need to actually kind of tune into your body. How are you feeling? Can you manage that today? Because when you are not actually feeling it, you're more prone to injuries, aren't you? And I think that another problem is maybe the culture in the gyms, because you're expected to kind of write a training regime and before you actually meet the client that day. And as you say, maybe that client has had a bad day, so you need to adjust it. And I think that needs also to change, like even clients being okay with you not having like kind of, I have written this, we have to fit this, we have to do it. I don't care if you're crying or not, because I have had crying clients who were just had a bad day, so they needed to have a cry before they could actually work out.
My superpower when I work with clients is that I can feel what's happening in their bodies. They would arrive at the session and I would say, how are you? They'll say, I'm fine, I'm great. But like, I can feel a knot in my body here. I can feel it here. I can feel it here. And so I would look at my plan and I would start to adapt it. Like, even though they said they're fine, I can kind of see that they're not, because their shoulders up here, or I can feel the tension. So I start to kind of adapt the warm up, or I start it a lot slower than I had planned. So I have the main components of the plan there, but the warm-up bit is always going to be different for each client. And the way in which they stretch afterwards is always going to be different.
That takes us back to, having an individualized approach, actually, when it comes to training. What a lot of people do is just copying others in the gym. Yes. And what might work for one person doesn't necessarily work for the other person. And also, they may have different goals. So you don't want to actually copy somebody else. You really want to see what is right for you. Sure. So what are some of the myths that you encounter actually when you are talking to people about it or in general?
Well, the first one is that you can't train on your period. And, I never used to train on my period. In fact, I used to, just out of habit, get the hot water bottle ready and curl up on the sofa and just not socialize and not be with anybody. And traditionally, I don't know where you're from, but like I come from Indian culture, you definitely would kind of just traditionally you would hide away. You'll kind of almost be put away in a different building. You can't go to the temple, you can't do anything. And I think that has developed, that has been around for such a long time. But I think your period is your superpower. I think it really is an amazing time to tune in and use your, might sound a little bit spiritual and hippie, but like listen to your inner wisdom. Like I think it's a really good time to plan and think about what you're going to do once your energy increases again. And I find that after maybe 1 or 2 days of feeling low, or like you've got period pains, etc., you can do your lower intensity exercise there, or you can rest. Of course, you can rest. But in week one, when you're still bleeding, you can lift, and you can lift so heavy. Like you do have more strength more energy because your hormones are at their lowest. And it's almost like throughout the rest of your cycle, your hormones are doing this, like they're going up and down and up and down. This is complex choreography that they're doing. And for the first time in your cycle, they're just like low. So it's a really good time to build your strength. So if you haven't tried it already, I would suggest going down to the gym. Obviously, don't try it for the first time ever, but if you do already lift weights during that time, and you'll be surprised at how heavy you can lift and how focused you are. So working out on your period is possible. And there are ways in which to make it more comfortable, like running. And you can use a menstrual cup. Even if you have like heavy flow, you can use a menstrual cup to be able to collect and use like an additional layer if you need. And it can be really comfortable. It doesn't have to be that because you're bleeding heavily, you can't do exercise. And it's amazing how you can shift the mindset that you've had your whole life and that society has told you. You can shift that mindset. And actually start enjoying being on your period. I now welcome it rather than I'm on my period. It's like, okay, yes, let's really optimize performance right now. So that's the first one. The second one is from pill users, so people, women on the combined pill, and they always say, "How does any of this relate to me? I'm on the pill, so I don't need to tune in and I don't need to adapt my training." And the thing that I've noticed is that the pill kind of makes women over optimized, or they think that they are like, that nothing's really affecting their energy levels because their hormones are flatlined like all the way through. So what that means is that they work at the same intensity throughout their month, and they don't adapt their training. So whether it's adapting their training like a menstruating woman or adapting their training like an athlete, like they're not doing the undulating thing. So I feel like they often burn out, or they run a risk of burning out. And I think they really need to pay attention to that. So those are the two myths that I've come across.
Well, that's really interesting. I'm from Iran, but I mean, it is not like you were saying about India that like kind of, a woman who's menstruating is hide away. It's not like that. But now that you were talking, I mean, I grew up in the West, in Austria, but now that you were talking about it, I remembered, yes, there was a myth like kind of, you should actually not exercise or do less. You should take it easy. So yes, I have heard that before. So can you share some, let's say, 3 practical tips for anybody who's watching this?
Okay, number 1 tip, I would say tune in. And that's going to be really hard if you're just going about your day in the way that you do, but it could just be a simple 5-minute practice. Some people find it really difficult to sit still, but if you can sit and just zone out for 5 minutes and just do like a body scan. How am I feeling today? I think that's great. If you can't do it sitting down, do it in the shower, wherever you are. But just, ask yourself that question: how am I feeling? Oh, I really suffered with my sleep last night. My muscles feel tight. Um, I've got a bit of a frown. I'm finding things a little bit difficult today. And then think about how you can adapt your day to serve you. The second thing I would do is I would use an app like Clue. I think Clue is an amazing one where you could just, once you've done your check-in, you can like log your symptoms on your phone, and that will enable you to, log your symptoms, log your period, find out if your period is late, find out what your cycle is, and over time you can come up with a really interesting bit of data that will show you how you're feeling. And then from that, the third tip is learn how to optimize it. So if you know that in week 1 and 2, you're in a really good mood, you're feeling really sociable, etc., and then week 3 and 4 you start to feel grumpy, fatigued, etc., how can the rest of your life sink into that? So like maybe in weeks 1 and 2 you can organize your pub dates with your friends, you can organize your high intensity workouts, or even away from exercise, your work commitments and meetings, etc., and be more sociable. And so use that to your advantage. And then in week 3 and 4, start to kind of withdraw and start spending more time on yourself and nurturing yourself and recovering and returning to homeostasis, returning to a good level of peace, understanding your own body and mental health.
I love that. Thank you. That is really useful. Can you send me a link to that app you mentioned? So yes. I put it in the description for people. Really interesting. It's really an interesting topic, I must say. You share so much valuable information, to be honest. I think it's also important just to get the conversation going, to discussion, because that is something not a lot of people talk about.